This segment will define the concept of grand strategy and identify multiple ways to differentiate grand strategies. Okay, so what's grand strategy? Grand strategy is the set of overarching ideas that structure the conduct of foreign policy. These big ideas have often been bundled together into a broad narrative or brand like containment or democracy promotion. Incorporated into this grand strategy brand are a series of subsidiary ideas, theories, or assumptions about the nature of the international political order, the principal sources of security threats that states face, the content of national interests, arguments about the appropriate means to achieve those interests, and a set of calculations about how to optimize this means-ends calculation. As the picture on this slide suggests, we intentionally place grand strategy at the top of a pyramid of American policies that shape how the U.S. interacts with other governments around the world. It's useful to think of grand strategy as playing an important organizing or coordinating role among these different dimensions of policy. Now, grand strategy is probably most appropriately labeled as an ideology akin to domestic partisanship in the United States. Debates about grand strategy have an important political component to them. This means that they can't always be adjudicated or resolved on the basis of empirical facts or logical consistency, as academic and theoretical debates can. Instead, grand strategy debates often incorporate important political or normative components that can be slightly impervious to evidence. Now, another way to observe this description is to explicitly cast debates over grand strategy as the international equivalent to domestic ideological debates oriented around partisanship. Domestic partisanship debates are partially rooted in some theoretical debates, say over the relationship between government intervention in the domestic economy and economic growth. For example, Republicans draw on economic theory associated with Hayek or Milton Friedman to support a limited public or governmental role in economic activity. Alternatively, Democrats are more likely to draw on Keynesian theory to advocate a more active government role in the domestic economy. While the ideological debates rest partially on underlying theoretical claims, the construction of an ideological position is also a political act designed to persuade the American people to support some policy. In the same way, debates over grand strategy also draw on underlying theories about, say, the nature of security threats in the international system. And there are also political statements about how to protect American national interest, designed partly to mobilize domestic political support around some set of foreign policies. In sum, I think it'll be helpful to think about debates over grand strategy as the international parallel to domestic debates over partisanship or between the political parties, namely Republicans and Democrats. Now, these competing ideologies provide a brand or a narrative about how to promote some set of national interests, while simultaneously providing a ready set of policy recommendations capable of achieving those goals. It's important to note that there is some mapping of partisanship with grand strategy, but the correlation is not perfect. This means that some members of the same political party will promote very different grand strategic visions. Now, you can see these distinctions in the Republican Party today. There are two very different grand strategy wings in the Republican Party. One wing of the Republican Party supports a much more ambitious grand strategy that relies heavily on military force to promote American interests, particularly the promotion of democracy around the world. Sometimes this grand strategy is defined as primacy, and it can be associated with political officials like Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, and the presidential administration of George W. Bush. On the other hand, there's another wing of the Republican Party associated with officials like President Trump and Rand Paul that call for less military action around the world, a renegotiation of alliance relationships, and cuts to the foreign aid budget. They often argue that American military involvement around the world can accentuate security problems for the United States by creating new enemies. This implies that the United States would be safer if it withdrew from some of its commitments around the world. Again, these examples illustrate that we should not equate grand strategy with partisanship in the United States. Partisanship is not a perfect predictor for a grand strategy position. Different Republican politicians sometimes support very different grand strategies.